in the furthest reaches of space, where nebulae painted the darkness with colors that had no names, there lived a creature older than most civilizations. Its name was Kalethar, though few beings dared to speak it aloud. The galaxy knew it simply as the Starborn dragon. Kalethar was not like the dragons from ancient Earth myths. It was something far more magnificent and terrifying. Its body stretched for miles, covered in scales that captured and reflected the light of 1,000 dying stars. When it moved through space, cosmic dust swirled around it like water around a swimming serpent. Its eyes glowed with the blue-white intensity of newborn suns, and when it breathed, streams of plasma hot enough to melt asteroids flowed from its jaws. The dragon had been born from the death of a massive star, pulled into existence by forces that even the most advanced species could not understand. It had watched galaxies spin and collide. It had seen species rise from primitive beginnings to conquer entire star systems, only to fade into dust and memory. Time meant nothing to Kalethar. Civilizations were like mayflies to the dragon, brief flickers in an endless night. Many had tried to approach the Starborn dragon over millennia. The Xantherii Collective, a race of beings made from living crystal, had sent their greatest diplomats. They offered tribute and knowledge, hoping to gain the dragon's favor. Kalethar had simply looked at them with its ancient eyes and said nothing. After waiting for 3 standard years, the Xantherii had left, their pride wounded but their lives intact. The Vulcan hierarchy had taken a different approach. They were warriors, conquerors who believed that strength was the only language worth speaking. They had brought warships, weapons that could crack planets, and threats that had made entire sectors of space bend the knee. The dragon had listened to their demands with what might have been amusement. Then, with a single sweep of its tail, it scattered their fleet like leaves in a storm. The Vulcan retreated, but they never forgot the humiliation. Some species had tried worship instead. They built temples in the void, sent priests who chanted in languages older than their own civilizations. They called the dragon a god, a force of nature, a spirit of the cosmos. Kalethar found this the most puzzling of all. It was not a god. It simply was. The worshippers eventually stopped coming when they realized their prayers went unanswered. The dragon had never bowed to anyone or anything. It had never shown submission, never acknowledged another being as its equal, let alone its superior. This was not arrogance, at least not entirely. It was simply the truth of its existence. What could challenge a creature born from a dying star? What could impress a being that had witnessed the universe's greatest wonders and horrors? Kalethar spent most of its time drifting through the celestial reaches, a region of space where few ships dare to travel. Here, among the remnants of dead stars and clouds of gas that would one day birth new solar systems, the dragon was alone. And in its own way, it was content with that solitude. Other beings were predictable. They wanted power, knowledge, territory, or safety. None of them seemed to want understanding. The dragon had learned long ago that most sentient species measure worth by strength or age or intelligence. By all those measures, Kalethar stood far above nearly everything else in the known galaxy. But this knowledge brought no joy, no satisfaction. It was simply a fact, as unchangeable as gravity or the speed of light. On this particular cycle, as humans measured time, the dragon rested near a dying red giant. The star was in its final days, swelling and pulsing as it consumed the last of its fuel. Kalethar found a strange peace in watching stars die. Perhaps because it was one of the few things that reminded the dragon of its own birth. Death and creation were not opposites in space. They were partners in an eternal dance. The dragon's senses, which stretched across light years, detected the usual movements of the galaxy. Trade ships following safe routes, military vessels patrolling borders, explorer craft poking at the edges of known space. Nothing interesting, nothing new, just the same patterns repeating endlessly, as they had for millions of years. Kalethar closed its massive eyes and let itself drift in the solar wind. Tomorrow would be like yesterday. The next century would be like the last. The dragon had stopped expecting surprises long ago. It had no way of knowing that a small human ship, damaged and desperate, was about to stumble into its domain and change everything. The alarm systems on the Wayfarer's Hope screamed warnings that nobody wanted to hear. The small exploration vessel tumbled through space, its navigation computer completely dead after a cascade failure in the jump drive. The crew of 23 humans scrambled to regain control, but the ship had already drifted far off course into unknown territory. Captain Rodriguez stared at the sensor readings with growing dread. They were in the celestial reaches. Every spacefaring species in the galaxy knew to avoid this region. This was where the Starborn dragon lived, and the dragon did not welcome visitors. Among the panicking crew was Lyra Chun, a young woman barely 19 years old. She was not a regular crew member but a student, taking her first journey into deep space as part of her xenobiology studies. While others ran to emergency stations, Lyra found herself drawn to the observation deck. She wanted to see where they were, even if it might be the last thing she ever saw. The view took her breath away. Massive clouds of purple and gold gas stretched in every direction, lit from within by newborn stars. The remnants of dead worlds drifted past like ancient tombstones. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Then she saw it. At first, Lyra thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. The shape moving through the nebula was too large to be real. But as it came closer, she realized the stories had not exaggerated. If anything, they had failed to capture the truth. The Starborn dragon was enormous beyond comprehension. Its body seemed to flow rather than move, scales catching and reflecting light in ways that hurt to look at directly. When it turned its head toward the ship, Lyra saw eyes that held the light of galaxies. This was not just a creature. This was a force of nature given form. On the bridge, Captain Rodriguez was desperately trying to establish communication. He broadcast greetings in 12 different languages. He transmitted mathematical sequences to show intelligence. He even tried the old first contact protocols from Earth's early space days. Nothing worked. The dragon simply floated there, watching the tiny human ship with what seemed like complete indifference. Lyra did not try to communicate through technology. She simply stood at the observation window and looked back at the dragon. Her hand moved almost without thinking, pulling out her worn journal and a pencil. She began to sketch, trying to capture not just what the dragon looked like, but what it felt like to see it, the ancient weight of its presence, the strange loneliness that seemed to surround it like the void itself. She did not draw a monster or a god. She drew a being that had been alone for too long. Something changed in that moment. The dragon, which had been moving past the ship, suddenly stopped. Its massive head turned, and those galactic eyes focused not on the ship, but on the window where Lyra stood. On her specifically. A voice entered her mind. It was not words exactly, but concepts that her brain translated into language she could understand. Why do you not flee? Lyra's heart hammered in her chest, but she kept her hand steady. She thought her response, hoping the dragon could hear her the same way she heard it. Why would I? You're the most magnificent thing I've ever seen. There was a pause that seemed to stretch forever. Then the voice came again, and this time Lyra detected something she had not expected. Curiosity. Others begged for their lives. They offered tribute or threatened violence. You do neither. What do you want from me? Lyra looked down at her sketch, then back at the dragon. She smiled, even though she knew the creature probably could not understand the gesture. I want to understand you. Not use you. Not control you. Just understand what it's like to be you. The dragon moved closer to the ship. On the bridge, alarms screamed louder. Crew members shouted warnings. Captain Rodriguez was ordering an evacuation to the escape pods, though everyone knew those pods would be useless against a being like this. But Lyra felt no fear. She pressed her hand against the window, and somehow she knew the dragon was not there to harm them. You are strange, little human, the voice said in her mind. In 4 million years, no one has asked me that question. Then maybe you've been talking to the wrong people, Lyra thought back. For the first time in longer than recorded history, the Starborn dragon felt something it had almost forgotten. Interest. This tiny creature, who would live and die in what was less than a heartbeat to the dragon, saw it as more than a force to be feared or used. She saw it as someone worth knowing. Kaylee's Thar decided to stay and continue the strange conversation. It had nowhere else to be, and for once, time did not feel quite so empty. For 3 days, the Wayfarer's hope remained in the celestial reaches, while the crew worked to repair their damaged systems. During that time, something unprecedented happened. The Starborn dragon stayed with them, and it spoke only to Lyra Chun. Each day, Lyra returned to the observation deck. She would sit with her journal and simply talk with the ancient being. She asked questions that no one had ever thought to ask, not about the dragon's power or how it could be used, but about what it had experienced in its millions of years of life. Kaylee's there found itself sharing memories it had not thought about in eons. It told Lyra about watching the first stars form after the universe's birth. It described the loneliness of being unique, of never finding another of its kind. It spoke about civilizations it had seen rise and fall, each one thinking it would last forever. "Don't you have any friends?" Lyra asked one day, her voice soft with genuine concern. The dragon had never considered the question before. "Friends require equals. There are none equal to me." "That's not what friends are," Lyra said gently. "Friends are people who understand you, who care about you. Power has nothing to do with it." The concept was foreign to Kaylee's, but intriguing. This human, who would live perhaps 100 years if she was lucky, was trying to teach something to a being older than her entire species. The dragon should have found it insulting. Instead, it found itself listening. Other crew members noticed a change. The dragon had stopped being a threat and had become almost protective of their ship. Some of the senior officers wanted to use this connection. They suggested Lyra ask the dragon for technology, for protection, for anything that could benefit humanity. Commander Hayes approached Lyra on the 4th day. "You have an opportunity here that might never come again. That creature could share knowledge that would advance our species by thousands of years." Lyra looked at him with disappointment in her eyes. "Kaylee's, there is not a resource to be mined. If you can't understand that, then you don't deserve to speak with it." She refused to manipulate the situation. Every conversation she had with the dragon remained honest and genuine. Kaylee's there noticed this too. The human girl had power over it now, in a strange way, yet she chose not to use it. This confused and fascinated the ancient being even more. On the 5th day, everything changed. The ship's sensors detected multiple vessels entering the region. Captain Rodriguez's face went pale when he saw the identification signals. The Vulcan hierarchy had found them. 12 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, forming a battle formation around the small human vessel. The Vulcan were a warrior race, tall and armored with exoskeletons that looked like living metal. They had tried to conquer the Starborn dragon centuries ago and had been humiliated. They had never forgotten. A communication came through, the Vulcan commander's voice harsh and grinding. "Human vessel, you are trespassing in forbidden space. You will be seized and your crew imprisoned. As for the creature you harbor with, we have come prepared." Lyra rushed to the bridge. Through the main viewport, she could see something terrifying. The largest Vulcan ship was powering up a weapon unlike anything she had ever seen. It pulsed with dark energy that seemed to eat the light around it. "That's a god killer," whispered one of the crew, an older engineer who had served in the border wars. "They've been building it for generations. It's designed to kill beings like the dragon." Captain Rodriguez made the only choice he could. He opened a channel to the Vulcan fleet. "We surrender. Take us prisoner, but please leave the dragon alone. It hasn't harmed us." The Vulcan commander laughed, a sound like grinding stones. "We did not come for you, humans. You are merely convenient witnesses. Today, the creature that shamed us dies. And if your ship is destroyed in the process, that is unfortunate but acceptable." Lyra felt the dragon's presence in her mind, calm and steady. "I could leave, little human. I could escape before their weapon fires. They cannot catch me if I choose to flee. But you won't," Lyra said aloud, tears forming in her eyes. She knew the dragon well enough now to understand. It would not run. Running would be admitting fear, and the Starborn dragon had never shown fear to anyone. "No," Kaylee's are confirmed. "I will not." The Vulcan weapon continued charging. Its dark energy grew stronger, a void that promised destruction. The crew of the Wayfarer's hope prepared for the end. But Lyra Chun was not ready to accept that ending. Not for herself, not for her crew, and especially not for her friend. Lyra ran to the corridors of the Wayfarer's Hope, her mind racing faster than her feet. She burst into the communications room, pushing past confused crew members until she reached the main console. "Lyra, what are you doing?" Captain Rodriguez shouted from the bridge through the intercom. "Get to an escape pod now." She ignored him. Her fingers flew across the controls, opening every communication channel the ship had. She broadcast on frequencies used by every known species in the galaxy. Hundreds of ships and stations would hear what she was about to say. She wanted witnesses. "My name is Lyra Chun," she began, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "I'm a human from Earth, and I'm standing between the Vulcan fleet and the Starborn dragon." On the bridge, Captain Rodriguez stared at the sensors in disbelief. Lyra had activated the ship's emergency beacon and positioning transponder. Every vessel within light years would know exactly where they were and what was happening. The Vulcan commander's voice crackled with anger. "Foolish child, move your vessel or be destroyed with the creature." "No," Lyra said simply. She thought about everything the dragon had shared with her over the past days. The loneliness, the millions of years of watching and never connecting, the weight of being the only one of its kind. "Kayleys are as ancient and irreplaceable," she continued, her words now being recorded and transmitted across the galaxy. "If you destroy something that has existed for millions of years just because you're afraid of it, you don't become powerful. You become small. You become destroyers of wonder. Is that really what you want a galaxy to remember about the Vulcan hierarchy?" For a moment, there was silence. Then the Vulcan commander spoke, his voice cold as the void. "We will be remembered as the ones who slew a god. Your words change nothing. Human." Charging sequence complete. Fire. The god-killer weapon unleashed its dark energy. It tore through space like a wound in reality itself, heading straight for where the dragon floated. And between the weapon and the dragon was a small, fragile human ship. Lyra closed her eyes. She had tried. Maybe it was not enough, but she had tried. Then she felt movement. Not the ship, but something vast and ancient moving around them. She opened her eyes and gasped. Kayleys had positioned its enormous body in a protective curve around the Wayfarer's Hope. The dragon's scales blazed with captured starlight as it faced the incoming attack. But that was not what made Lyra's breath catch in her throat. The Starborn dragon, who had bowed to no one in 4 million years, slowly lowered its massive head, not in submission to the Vulcan, not in defeat, but in a gesture of respect toward the observation window where Lyra stood, the girl who saw it not as a weapon or a god, but as someone worth knowing, someone worth protecting. The god-killer weapon struck the dragon with the force of a collapsing star. The energy tore into Kayleys' scales, burning and ripping. The dragon roared, and the sound carried through space itself, shaking every ship in the region. But it held its position, absorbing the terrible blast, keeping the human vessel safe behind its body. Throughout the galaxy, on 100 worlds and 1,000 stations, beings watched the recording of what happened next. They saw the Starborn dragon, wounded and bleeding light from its injuries, turn its burning gaze upon the Vulcan fleet. They saw ancient rage made manifest. What followed was not a battle. It was a lesson. Kayleys moved through the Vulcan formation like a storm through paper. Its claws tore through warship hulls. Its breath melted weapons that had taken centuries to build. Its tail scattered vessels across the void. The dragon was wounded, yes, but it was also furious in a way it had not been for millions of years. But something was different. The dragon did not kill. Every ship it disabled. It left intact enough for the crew to survive. Every weapon it destroyed. It did so without destroying the vessel carrying it. This was not the blind rage of a beast. This was controlled, purposeful. This was mercy. The Vulcan commander, his flagship crippled and drifting, could not believe what he was seeing. The creature they had tried to kill was sparing them, not out of weakness, but out of choice. Lyra's voice came over the open channel one more time. "Leave now. Tell everyone what happened here. Tell them the Starborn dragon showed you more mercy than you showed it." The remaining Vulcan vessels retreated, jumping to faster-than-light speeds as quickly as their damaged systems allowed. In the silence that followed, Kaylee's Thar returned to the Wayfarer's hope. The dragon was hurt, its scales cracked and dim, but its eyes still held that ancient light. "Why did you do that, little human?" the voice asked in Lyra's mind. "You could have died." Lyra pressed her hand against the window, tears streaming down her face. "Because that's what friends do." The recording spread to the galaxy like wildfire. Within days, every major civilization had seen what happened in the celestial reaches. The Starborn dragon, the ancient being who had never bowed to anyone, had lowered its head in respect to a young human girl. Then it had shown mercy to enemies who had tried to kill it. The galaxy did not know what to make of this. The Xantherii Collective called an emergency council. For centuries, they had tried to gain the dragon's favor with offerings of crystal and knowledge. A human child had succeeded with nothing but honest conversation. The Vulcan hierarchy was in chaos. Their greatest weapon had failed, and worse, they had been spared by the creature they sought to destroy. Some called for renewed attacks. Others, seeing the recording of the dragon's controlled fury and deliberate mercy, argued for a different path. The debate would continue for years. But the biggest change came in how other species viewed humanity. Humans were young, barely 300 years into space travel. They had no great weapons, no vast empire, no ancient wisdom. Yet somehow, one of them had connected with a being older than most stars. Diplomatic requests flooded Earth's communication networks. Species that had barely acknowledged humanity before now wanted meetings, treaties, cultural exchanges. Everyone wanted to understand what the dragon had seen in the humans. Lyra found herself at the center of attention she never wanted. She was called a hero, an ambassador, a symbol of humanity's potential. Universities offered her positions. Governments wanted her advice. Media outlets from a dozen worlds wanted interviews. She hated all of it. What Lyra wanted was to return to the celestial reaches, to the quiet conversations with an ancient being who had become her friend. But first, the Wayfarer's hope had to limp back to the nearest human station for repairs. The journey took 3 weeks, and every day, Lyra felt the dragon's presence in her mind, patient and constant. "You are unhappy," Kaylee's Thar observed during one of their mental conversations. "Everyone wants to use what happened," Lyra replied, staring out at the stars from her small quarters. "They don't care about you as a person. They just see an opportunity." "That is what I have experienced for millions of years," the dragon said. "It is why your approach was so unusual, so refreshing." "I don't want to be famous," Lyra said quietly. "I just want to keep talking with you, to keep learning." "Is that selfish?" The dragon was silent for a moment. Then its voice returned, warmer somehow. "I have a proposal, little human. When your ship is repaired, come back to me. Stay with me, not forever, but as long as you wish. Continue our conversations. I find that I do not want them to end." Lyra smiled for the first time in days. "I like that, but I can't stay all the time. I have a life to live, people who care about me. Would that be okay? You wish to come and go as you please?" The dragon sounded puzzled. "You could ask me for anything, and you ask for the freedom to leave?" "That's what friendship is," Lyra explained. "It's not about ownership or obligation. It's about choosing to be together because you want to, not because you have to." Kaylee's Thar considered this. The concept of compromise was new to a being that had never needed to consider another's wishes before. But the dragon found it did not mind. Not with this human. "Then we have an agreement," the dragon said. "Come when you wish. Leave when you must. I will be here." 3 months later, Lyra returned to the celestial reaches on a small research vessel. This time, she came with proper equipment and permission from Earth Science Council. She had negotiated a unique position studying xenobiology with the most remarkable subject in the galaxy. The dragon had agreed to let her observe, ask questions, and even bring other students occasionally. But mostly, it was just the two of them among the stars. Lyra set up a small habitat module that could float near wherever the dragon chose to rest. She filled it with her books, her sketches, and her research equipment. Every day, she would sit at the observation window and talk with Kaylee's Thar about everything and nothing. The dragon, for its part, discovered something it had not felt in 4 million years. Purpose, not the purpose of being feared or worshipped, but the simple purpose of having someone who cared whether you existed or not. Word spread that the Starborn dragon had become a protector of humanity, not through force or obligation, but through genuine respect. When human ships traveled through dangerous regions, they would sometimes see a massive shape moving through the distance, watching over them. Pirates and hostile forces learned to avoid human vessels, because no one wanted to face the dragon's wrath. But Kalees did not do this because humans commanded it or because it owed them anything. It did it because one human had shown it that connection mattered more than power. 5 years after their first meeting, Lyra sat in her habitat module, now 24 years old and working on her doctoral thesis. The dragon floated nearby, watching a new star being born in the distance. "Do you regret it?" Lyra asked suddenly. "Bowing to me? Some beings in the galaxy think it made you look weak." The dragon's mental voice held something that might have been amusement. "I have existed for 4 million years in isolation and indifference. You showed me that existence without connection is merely survival, not life. I regret nothing." Lyra smiled, adding a note to her journal. "And you reminded us that power without wisdom is just noise. That real strength includes knowing when to yield, when to protect, when to show mercy. We teach each other, then." Kalees observed. "That's what friends do," Lyra said softly. Together, ancient and young, they watched the birth of a new star. The dragon had learned that true strength was not in never bowing, but in choosing who deserved that respect. And Lyra had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing in the universe was simply seeing another being for who they truly were. The galaxy continued to turn. Civilizations rose and would eventually fall. But in the celestial reaches, a girl and a dragon had found something that would outlast empires. They had found understanding. And that, perhaps, was the greatest power of all.